camp of the non-hospital cases, and getting them shipped up the 3 or 4 kilometers where they had to go. At that time, of course, until that time, all the prisoners were still there, and they were still dying, of course. And one of the job that was going on within the camp is burying the dead. It was felt, obviously, that was one of the first priorities. And the SS guards that were being arrested were made to do that. Because, I said, there were dead bodies everywhere, and including in the huts where people were living. There were probably 1,000 people in one hut, which was built for 200, something of that kind. And a lot of the people in the huts had actually died, but there was nobody was strong enough or able to do anything except to leave the dead bodies there. So the first kind of a job was to get the dead bodies out and transported up to the pits that the Germans had started to dig and add to the pile that was already there. And that went on day after day after day. Every day there was another lot of people, poor people, had died and had to be removed. And the SS were made to do that, including the women SS too. Some of you may have seen some pictures of all this, where they're heaving corpses onto lorries and all that. At this time, I think the most horrible, horrendous job that anybody could be given was given to 70 medical students from England. They were shipped out there to help, and they were given the job of going into these huts one by one and assessing whether people were worth saving or not. You see, typhus was absolutely endemic there, and dysentery, and the condition was absolutely indescribable. But they had to go in and decide one by one whether this person was too far gone or whether they were worth saving. And that's what they had to do, and they did, and some of the Hungarians were used as like stretcher bearers to take out the people who were savable, hopefully, and take them and put them in the ambulances to go up to the barracks in the hospital section. And they did that until they got to the end of that. But I can't imagine a worse job to give young men, mostly in their teens and early 20s. So so I, as I said, had to organize a transport of the people who were fit enough to walk anyway, up into the transit camp. And what we did at the exit of the camp, we set up showers. We had a mobile bath unit, army, and a hygiene unit arrived with DDT sprays. You know, typhus is carried by lice, and the answer to lice was DDT in those days. It probably still is, I don't know. But of course it was very important to try to see that the typhus didn't spread into the barracks as well. And so everybody had to shower that was going to be evacuated, were liberally sprayed with DDT, and their clothes if they were wearable. If not, meanwhile, a lot of clothing had been taken from German civilian population around shops and so on, and were given clothes, and to be put into lorries and transported up 3 or 4 kilometers away. And we were doing that day after day. We were shipping normally something like 1,000 people a day up to do that. We had I had about 6 or 8 lorries and the men, and also some volunteers from the not too ill inmates who helped with all this. And the thing is how to evacuate the people as fast as possible. Even so, it took something like 3 weeks before we could get everybody out. Which means that some people had to stay in this camp 2 or 3 weeks after we got there, which is an awful thing, but there was no other alternative. And so towards the end of this operation, when there weren't not too many people left, I was next given the job of taking command of the transit camp in the barracks, which by this time has probably had over 20,000 people in it. And that's what I was deputed to do, with about 20 soldiers there, and volunteers from the ex-prisoners. And so that's what I did eventually. After the last prisoner had been evacuated, the Belsen camp itself was burnt down, and nothing remains of it. The point is, it was so infected and so poisonous that it was the only thing to do, and it was completely destroyed. So we're in the barracks, and we've got all these people. Now, as I said, the whole idea of the transit camp was they should go there and get a meal or get reasonably fit, and then they'd all go home. Well, of course, those who came from France, Belgium, Holland did very quickly go home because their government sent transport and off they went, fine. But then it was something towards 30,000 people at the end, 25 or something, who were there who refused to go home. Why did they refuse? It's because they were mostly Polish Jews from the Ukraine and from Russia, and their home by this time was in occupied territory by the USSR, by the Soviets. And they absolutely refused to go back. The rumor went around, and probably true, is that any civilians emerging from the West, from Germany, and being in like British or American hands, probably was a spy, or anyway anti-Soviet. And the rumor was they were immediately rearrested, those such people, and shipped up to, again, another prison camp in Russian hands. So that's what they all thought, and maybe they're right. Anyway, the fact remains that they wouldn't go, which was, of course, a complete surprise to us. We thought that the first thing anybody wanted to do would be to go home. Anyway, they said, we're not going, we're here. And something's got to be done about it. So it sort of settled into a long-term operation. The job was very largely keeping peace between all these people who are different nationalities and different languages, trying to make comprehensive lists of their names, their addresses, and relatives were coming to the camp to try to find their relatives, and it was a real humanitarian disaster situation, of course. Anyhow, after some time, we made life kind of tolerable for these people. We got, as they got better, of course, they recovered with decent food and water and bedding and so on. The people that went into the hospital when they were released, they joined the transit camp. And it gradually got sorted out with various committees and ex-inmates taking charge.